I'd like to show you 3 games from day 3 of the Chess 960 event in St. Louis. 2 from the match between Topalov and Kasparov, and 1 from the match between Nakamura and Svidler. So first of all, the match between Garry Kasparov and Veselin Topalov. So far, Garry hasn't had an easy ride, but there were signs of recovery on day 3. The first 2 games were rapid games, and well, they traded blows. Garry won one game, quite complicated, but in the second he blundered again very quickly and he lost. So 1-1 in the rapids. Then they went into the Blitz, and in the first Blitz game, well, we joined this game at move 56, and very quickly this game reached a really very normal position, a very technical position, which Garry played excellently. And after 56 moves, you can see that he's won a pawn and has this beautiful regular pawn structure, 1 pawn island. Topalov a pawn down, and he is struggling. And even here we see it's an isolated pawn, and well, technically still tricky, but should be winning for white. Let's see how Garry proceeded. So first of all, c3. He wants to break with d4. Now there's no rush in positions like this, so he just makes sure his king comes into the middle of the board before he does anything at all. Of course, it was a Blitz game. They've already been playing for some time, and yeah, the clock was ticking down, so neither player had so much time. And Garry decides, right, now is the moment. I'm going to break with d4. Of course, if you play knight c5, it doesn't actually win a pawn here because a5 could be played. So d4, very logical, just using his extra pawn through the middle of the board. And d5, why not? Connected past pawn, and pushes the knight back, and the king comes forward, and well, as we'll see, white can break with this move c4. There we go, c4. Now black has to prevent the pawn advancing, so exchanges on c4, but that brings the king to a really beautiful position. So far so good for Kasparov, things working out very well. And now knight c5 is very logical, putting the knight on an excellent square, looking at the pawn on a6. Obviously black can't exchange, that's just a lost king and pawn endgame, so the knight comes to a good blockading square, d6. Check, and the king comes back to defend the pawn on e4, and the pawn on a6 is threatened. Now there's only one way to defend that, and that's by advancing the king, but then there's knight d7 check, forking king and pawn. So the only chance for Topalov is to advance and capture the pawn on b4. But with the 2 connected central passed pawns, this must be winning. However, still there are some details here. Knights are tricky, kings are tricky. That's a passed pawn that we're going to see provide some counterplay. But Kasparov's next move is excellent. I suppose, you know, in a Blitz game, the obvious move might be to check with the knight and advance your pawns. But checking is actually a mistake, because then the king would come back, and it's not so easy to advance these. Kasparov's move is excellent. Knight d7 looks counterintuitive to somehow step in front of this pawn, but the point is that it prevents black's king coming back to c5, and then this e-pawn is ready to advance. Black only has one possible strategy here, and that's to create some confusion by advancing the passed pawn. Kasparov steams ahead and starts pushing. Topalov pushes as well, so be careful, and knight f6. But this knight is ready to come back to defend if necessary, and this pawn is going forward. So knight a7, good defense from Topalov actually. He finds his only possible chance. After d7, the knight comes back to prevent white's pawn queening. The pawn advances. I mean, this looks completely lost for black. But incredibly, it's still a little bit tricky after a3. And here, with his time ticking down, he's played up to this moment really a perfect game. But unfortunately, right at the death, Gary blows it. He threw in a check with the knight. This position just needs a bit of cold calculation. To calculate, you need time. And with seconds on the clock, Gary blew it. He chose the wrong way. The winning move here is to push forward with e7. Now, if that's taken, then we get a queen. Thank you very much. So black has to advance the a pawn, and now we get a queen. Now, if black gets a queen, let's take a look. We can give a check, and we can simply force an exchange of queens and then promote the second pawn. So after this, of course, the only chance is to take the queen. So we take, and black promotes to a queen. Now, queen and knight against queen is actually a theoretical draw. But in this position, black's king is so badly placed and white's king so well placed that, in fact, even without this knight, this is a winning position for white. Let me show you how. Queen b6 check. I mean, this is actually a very well-known position. Check. The king has to, of course, keep protecting the queen. We give a check here. If king c1, that's mate on c2. And let's go back here. And if king a2, then king b3. I mean, this knight is actually completely irrelevant. And there's no way to prevent checkmate on one of these squares. So that was the win. Unfortunately, Gary was trying to sort of keep things simple and play knight d5. Perhaps he had the idea to bring the knight back to c3 to stop the pawn and then push forward with his pawns. Who knows? The problem with this is that after king c5, incredibly, the king is ready to come back to d6. So, for example, well, it'll be the same with the knight back to c3. If king c3, then king d6, and I mean, it almost seems like an optical illusion, but incredibly, white is unable to win from that position. The king can stop the pawns. So after king c5, Gary queened, pushed with e7, black pushes, and here again we have this endgame of queen and knight against queen. But in this case, black's king is actually safe, and the queen is safe as well. There are no unfortunate checks that pick up the queen. And, well, both sides had just seconds on their clock, but I guess the defense isn't too difficult. You know, you basically keep checking, and a good rule as well is to try and keep the knight pinned to the king, and then there can be no nasty accidents with a knight check. Well, Kasparov tried for a little bit, but well, it was quite clear that it was all in vain. Gary knew that, and after a couple more checks, he gave up the struggle and offered Topalov a draw, which was of course accepted. So a very near miss, and very unlucky for Gary. He did play an excellent game. For a Blitz game, actually, he played incredibly accurately for 99% of this game, but unfortunately just blew it in one move. But a credit to Vasilij Topalov for clinging on and putting up the maximum resistance. Do check out the other two games I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at the next Blitz game between Kasparov and Topalov. You can find the link up there in the tab. Click on that if you want to have a look at that, and also click on the tab to see the game, a very, very interesting game between Peter Svidler and Hikaru Nakamura. Got a couple of questions for you. Tell me, what do you think of Kasparov coming out of retirement again? He likes to sort of dabble a little bit with chess these days. Good idea or bad idea? Should he have just stopped completely in 2005? And next question, what do you think of Chess 960? I'm very intrigued to gauge your opinion. Let me know in the comments section. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget it's free to subscribe. Just click on the subscribe button and click on the bell if you want instant notifications. And if you want to support the channel, do check out patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. Thanks for watching.